Thank everybody for having me here. Can you hear me all right? Well, I don't know about you, but between the last time I talked to your club and now, I feel like I'm living in an entirely different world. I keep telling my wife that I feel like we entered a Twilight Zone episode in America where everything's flipped upside down. But what's amazing is that we should be appalled, but we should not be surprised about anything that's happening with us. Because what is happening right now has been happening in other countries for well over 100 years. And they are following the exact same pattern that they have followed in other societies when there was an insurrection/revolution. And make no mistake about it, this is not a movement dealing with inner city issues, Black Lives Matter, or social justice. This is an insurrection/revolution, and it has been planned for a long, long time. And so, for instance, one of the things that's been happening over the last couple of months, there was the flashpoint of the death of George Floyd, and I certainly support bringing those cops to justice, but not street justice, not the court of public opinion, but a real court. So I support that. What happened to him was heinous. But that became a flashpoint. But as Rahm Emanuel said, who was Obama's former chief of staff and the former mayor of Chicago, he used to say, never let a crisis go to waste. And what I can tell you is there are powers that be. There's three groups of people that want to destroy the United States as we've known it. They are anarchists, socialists, and globalists. And even though they are at odds with what their ultimate goal is, they are operating by the old political science maxim that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's what they're operating on. So let me tell you what happened over the last 10 years here in the state of California, because California is one of the most progressive states in the country, which means they didn't need to do a violent revolution or a violent overthrow because they already have control of our government. They have control of our courts, they have control of the state legislature, and they have the control of all the statewide offices. It's all populated and dominated by progressive Democrats. So a number of years ago, Jerry Brown, to deal with the pension crises, implemented AB 109. AB 109 dumped a bunch of prisoners out of the state prison because they couldn't afford the salaries and pensions of the guards and the cost of the prisoners. So they opted for the guards and they dumped the prisoners into county jails. Most county jails are already full. And so the county jails quit taking anybody that was less than a felon. So what they did is there was two propositions, Prop 57 and 47. Now let me ask you this. Which of the following list would you deem as non-violent or not violent crimes? Assault with a deadly weapon, domestic violence, battery with serious bodily injury, solicitation to commit murder, rape, sodomy, and oral copulation of an unconscious person or by way of date rape drugs, human trafficking of a minor for sex, active participation in a street gang, exploding a destructive device with intent to commit injury, arson of forest land causing physical injury, and finally, assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer. By virtue of Prop 47 and 57, none of those are considered violent crimes in the state of California. So they took the people out of the state prison, put them in the jail. The people belonged in the jail are on our streets. And what they did through these propositions, they lowered felonies to misdemeanors and misdemeanors to citations. We now have tens of thousands of failures to appear for a citation because the penalty is a citation. They're not showing up. The cops aren't even bothering writing up these crimes. Then in the meantime, I'm getting back to this plot or this plan. In the meantime, a guy named George Soros. How many of you have heard of George Soros? George Soros in 2016 spent tens of millions of dollars to get state attorney generals and local district attorneys elected that would go soft on crime throughout this country. So, for instance, in most of these major cities, after they've arrested the rioters and the looters, they've got let go. They didn't let go because they had a no bail system like California implemented. They got let go because the DAs wouldn't press the charges. George Soros has put $250 million into Antifa and BLM for these riots and this looting. And then what happens, so you have the issue with the jails and the prisons. You have the way they solve crime is to eliminate the definition of crime or the statutes associated with crime. And then you had this measure that I don't think it's been officially introduced into Congress yet, but it's called the Breathe Act. The Breathe Act is being called the Civil Rights Act of 2020. And this is just a short summary of that. It calls for the reduction of federal funding to local police and federal law enforcement agencies, including eliminating the Drug Enforcement Agency and Immigrations and Custom Enforcement, or ICE. The Breathe Act demands that local jurisdictions close detention facilities, including local jails, state prisons, and youth prisons. And it calls for drug convictions retroactively be expunged and all existing state juvenile offenses to be repealed. The squad has endorsed this. 2 of the members of the squad are listed on the Breathe Act. All you have to do is Google Breathe Act. The whole thing's written out. 2 of them are called the champions of the Breathe Act, Presley and Tlaib. And get this, they don't want reparations for just black people. They want it for all people that have been incarcerated, including for drugs and prostitution. Reparations. So when you see them tearing down a statue, that is a symbol. When you see them now attacking police precincts and federal court buildings, that is a direct, violent assault on our institutions of law and order. All of this is planned. It's happened in other countries too many times to cite. One of my mentors in life is actually a fairly famous political scientist. He traveled in the same circles as Henry Kissinger. So I've been talking to him almost weekly for 40 years. I met him when he was a professor. And anyway, make a long story short, I've had him on the show a couple of times where he traces what's happened in all these countries going back to the French Algiers and in Nazi Germany. This is how they create the beginning or sow the seeds of a revolution. Now, I want to tell you something about me. I grew up, my dad was a Bataan Death March survivor. He died when I was 9. My mom was an immigrant from Austria, so I was raised in a single-parent family. My mom worked part-time, so I started working when I was 9 years old. I had 2 jobs in high school, 2 jobs in college, and then when I got out of college, I ended up doing manual labor for a number of years. But while I was doing that, I volunteered at the Lompoc Penitentiary for 7 years, and I also volunteered in the county probation department in Santa Barbara County for a full year. In college, my 3 roommates were Black. The school I went to at UCSD focused on minority studies. So I've understood, I actually wrote a paper back in college about why there was dysfunction in our inner cities. Now, there's not just dysfunction there, but there is a lot of dysfunction there. In fact, I was talking to these moms over here. The dropout rate in the inner cities is 70%. There is a school to prison pipeline that has to be broken. Those kids, and again, I met these people through my prison ministry and everything else. These kids do get caught up in a criminal justice system where they're hosed. They don't have a chance. They get a public defender. That's got 5 to 10 times the number of cases any regular attorney would try to handle. And the bail system does need to be changed, because the way the bail system works, and I'm going to give you an embarrassing story about me. I was on the YMCA board of directors in Santa Maria. This was when I was the industrial relations manager of Union Sugar. So the guys on the board decide we're going to go to the lake and have a board retreat while we're water skiing and doing other things. So I go up there with these guys, and they had an old-fashioned, this story is 30 years old, they had an old-fashioned jet ski. And they asked me if I wanted to take it out off the dock to wherever we were going to go day camp. And I said, sure, but I said, I've never driven one. I've never ridden one. And they said, you'll figure it out. Well, this is the old style. You don't just sit down. You had to pull yourself up and then stand up. I was having a heck of a time doing that. I finally did get up. And so I was on this jet ski going back and forth, just trying to get the feel of it. And I come around a bend, and there's a boat right there. And I wasn't going fast enough to turn around. So I just let go of the throttle, got on my belly, and floated around the boat with the guys. And I waved to them, said, sorry for interrupting your day here. And then I got back on it when I got safely past. And I went and hooked up back with these guys. There were CPAs, doctors, and lawyers who were all on this board together. Well, about a half hour later, Harbor Patrol shows up, and the guy cites me for a felony endangerment. Felony endangerment with a jet ski. It was as if I rooster-tailed him when I got too close to the boat versus floating around on my stomach. Well, we were newlyweds, and we probably had a couple of kids. If we went out to dinner, it was fast food with the coupon. Okay, that was it. I mean, we were just dirt poor. We had, we were poor newlyweds. We had sheets up instead of blinds over the windows. And I'm thinking, I can't afford an attorney. I've never broken a law other than a traffic citation in my life. This guy charged me with a felony. So I had to go to court by myself because there was no way I could afford anything. And I went up to the DA and I explained what happened. And he says, that's ridiculous. And he dropped it to a misdemeanor, but I still had to pay a couple $100. Well, if I was wealthy, I would have gotten an attorney and got that whole thing thrown out. But as it was, I had to miss a day of work to go to that court system. Well, this is what inner city youth are hitting on steroids. They can get accused and or falsely accused and or charges elevated beyond the scope. And they end up plea bargaining because they can't afford to risk anything else. I understand that. I had a prison ministry and I worked in the probation department. So I understand that things need to be fixed. However, those things are symptomatic. I've written a column that's going to be out this week, and it's called Black Lives Redeemed. The number one problem, and Patrick Moynihan pointed this out in the 1960s, the number one problem in the inner cities is the disintegration of the nuclear family. That has led to no fathers in the home. No fathers in the home mean those kids, especially those young boys and young men, have one choice. They either try to avoid the gang or they join the gang to stay alive and to stay well. And what happens is too many of these kids, they can't avoid the gang, end up joining it because it's a means for opportunity for protection and money. Because these gangs are organized for criminal activity and they make a lot of money. And that is part of that school to prison pipeline that needs to be broken. The other thing that happened, just a few weeks ago, there was a double or triple murder in the San Joaquin Valley. And this is I'm going to call it even though it was a small town, I'm going to call it an inner city dysfunction, where these people are having a family birthday party and some gangbangers showed up and just shot up the place and killed 2 or 3 people. And what the story said is the cops were frustrated because nobody would cooperate with them as witnesses. There is a code in the street that even if your family member just got shot and killed, the cops are the bad guys. Street justice will take care of the people that did this because they all know who did it. They all know each other. This is why in Chicago, every single weekend, several dozen, if not 100 people get murdered, shot and murdered because of this dysfunction that has been raging in these communities for decades. And see, nobody's talking about that on the national level. They're talking about George Floyd, and what happened to George Floyd was heinous. Breonna Taylor, what happened to her was heinous. What happened to the guy that was jogging was absolutely criminal when he was killed by vigilantes. Yes, that stuff has to happen, but that is still dealing with symptoms. If we want to, what somebody told me one time, if you want to change the fruit, affect the root. And again, this is something I'm passionate about, but here's the bottom line. There's a lot of us that reads what happens in Portland or Oakland or Seattle or Los Angeles, and we say, thank God I live on the Central Coast. Well, how many of you can say that now? Santa Maria, people tore down a flagpole, and then they went and ransacked the town center mall. In San Luis Obispo, they blocked the freeways now twice. And in at least one instance, a vehicle was attacked. Secondly, I did a town hall Zoom meeting with some business owners in San Luis Obispo about 2 weeks ago. And what happened there is these business owners, they didn't know if this was going to be a peaceful protest or a violent one. So the owner of the building boarded up the windows, the businesses closed, the march went by, no incidents, and they thought, wow, we breathed a good one here. But then not long after that, some representatives of the protest showed up and said, we noticed you boarded up your windows. We noticed you didn't have any signs of support. You didn't join us. We would like you to contribute to our organization, or we're going to go after you and your business. This is not one business owner. I've heard this from at least 3 different business owners it was a forced attempt shakedown in San Luis Obispo. Folks, you have to understand that we are witnessing a revolution. We are witnessing an insurrection. This was planned a long time ago. In fact, some of the things that these people are doing were written up in the 1960s by a group called the Weathermen, or the Weather Underground. And one of the things they've got to do, besides law and order institutions, the other thing they're going after is the church. Because the church gives moral authority to the family and the state. They want to take the moral high ground. They have to be able to claim that their revolutionary act is a just cause. They call it a social justice movement or social justice advocate. They want to have the moral, ethical high ground, and to do that, they've got to either intimidate the church, take out the church, or if they can't do that, attack the church. And they're already doing that. They're firebombing churches in America. They're tearing down statues of Mary. They're tearing down Father Sarah. Now, I'm not naive. I don't think what we did to the Indians was very good at all. But a friend of mine was a songwriter. She was a Christian songwriter. And she wrote this song about back then. This is back in the 70s, probably 70s or 80s, where she had a charm bracelet in this song. And this charm bracelet had a symbol of every good thing and every traumatic thing that had ever happened to her. And when you asked her why she would memorialize even the traumatic things, she said, because good or bad, all of these things made me who I am. And so we don't have to, for instance, the Sierra Club's now ditching John Muir. Orange County's getting rid of John Wayne. The Big E, Planned Parenthood now is starting to distance itself from Margaret Sanger. We already know about Father Sarah and Christopher Columbus and George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. My favorite was this Massachusetts in Boston. There's a big, huge, beautiful memorial to this Massachusetts regiment. They completely defaced it, broke it up. But if you look up that regiment, it was an all-black Union soldier regiment from Massachusetts, fighting for the freedom of the slaves in the South. And they defaced this because these people are ignoramuses, and they're indiscriminate in their destruction and hatred for our country. And when they say that we have systemic racism or institutionalized racism, what they're literally saying is the patient can't be saved. You can't save America. It has to be destroyed, and we have to start over. And of course, what they want it modeled on is either anarchy, socialism, or globalism, depending on the camp. More than likely, the globalists are going to win because they're the ones who have money. And the socialists, at least here in America, are for hire, and the anarchists are willing to be hired. Folks, this election truly is and truly does represent an existential threat to the United States of America. It's an existential threat. And we've got to get out the vote. Salute Carbajal has over $1 million in the bank. Over $1 million, including over 400,000 from political action committees from throughout the United States. I've been hindered in my ability to raise money because we were doing it like this, through meet and greets. And in barns, wineries, parks, in restaurants. And of course, all of that's hard right now. And so I need your help. I need your help to raise money. I need your help to get out the word. Let me tell you this. I was a Democrat half my life. any normal Democrat is as scared and upset as we are about what's happening in this country right now. You have, and we have, a common concern to appeal to these people. Independents, Democrats, decline the states, what have you. And I can sum up this speech with this. A couple of weeks ago, the Republicans put forth a resolution that condemned what happened to George Floyd, and it also condemned rioting, looting, and efforts to defund the police. You remember one thing from this speech, remember this: a resolution to condemn the brutality of George Floyd's death, a resolution to condemn rioting, looting, and defunding the police. Not one Democrat in the House of Representatives would support that resolution. Not one. Have you heard, has anybody seen Salud Carbajal issue a press release that he condemns what's going on in America right now? He's going to hide behind his claim that he's Mr. Bipartisan, he's representing the district, and he's busy doing the people's business. But folks, America is burning. America is being looted. Pregnant woman, if you watch those videos about what happened on last week, I've watched over probably 2 hours of those videos. There was a pregnant woman on the freeway saying, I've got to get through this blockade. You know what they asked her? They said, has your water broke yet? They asked the pregnant woman who was on the way to the hospital, has your water broke? I'll tell you, the gal that is the self-appointed leader of the BLM in San Luis Obispo, and I have this up on my Facebook. It's a less than a 1-minute clip. She's carrying a flag all day long, upside down. And then they stop at several points along the way as if this was a party. They're breakdancing to a drum beat in their chant. They're breakdancing like this is just some fun thing to get out in the middle of a street. At one point in this demonstration, she puts that flag on the ground, and pardon me, I won't say the word, but in the video she says, F the United States, F the flag of the United States, then she spits on the flag, and then she stomps on the flag. Heidi Harmon, on several occasions, hangs out with this gal. She was at the beginning of that rally. The only reason she didn't stay with them is she had a city council meeting. Folks, these people are all working together. And if we don't start working, literally making this a cause, we have less than 100 days to win this election. Everybody is voting by mail beginning first week of October. First week of October, everybody is getting a vote by mail ballot. We have less than 100 days to win this race. I need financial support. I need you to walk your precincts asking everybody if they're registered. I need you to just simply ask a question. Are you happy with the rioting, looting, and defunding the police? Are you happy with mob action shutting down a freeway and the cops doing nothing? Sure, they arrested her afterwards, but I wanted all those people cited. Yes. Every single one of them. Just start talking to these people. What do you feel about what's going on in our country? And if they'll say that, well, the black people have a legitimate cause, say, I agree. And how is that helping them? How is any of that helping their cause? How does defunding the police change the fact that 90% of all black deaths in America are black on black violence? Folks, I've never wanted to be a politician, but I always wanted to be a statesman, or aspire to be a statesman, to speak to principles and priorities, not politics. And I'll tell you, when I agreed to run for office, I had no idea why, but now I know why. And in fact, one of our commercials back in January was of people tearing down statues. We had that in one of our first commercials because we knew what was going on. Because none of this is new. This stuff has been happening, but it didn't have the mass of momentum, the critical mass that they've got right now. And that critical mass, the other name for it is a mob. They're not trying to change people's minds. They're trying to intimidate people into surrendering and yielding. And my dad did not die during World War II, but the trauma he received through the death march killed him and almost everybody else in that march before age 50. My dad died when he was 47. I didn't know till much later that most all of them died that early. Well, I'm not giving up without a fight. How about you? Does anybody